Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Here we are in March. March Madness is just about over with. That's one of the biggest events that happens when it's the NCAA basketball tournament. And you can be certain that there are a lot of bookies and people out there that are trying to find ways to kind of find the easy way to make money. In fact, our guest joining us here on the program today was one of the people that was behind one of the largest sports scandals in American history. It's the Arizona State point-shaving operation that involved dozens of casinos, bookmakers throughout the East Coast and Midwest, NCAA players, and millions of dollars bet and won. His book is No Gray Areas. It's the inside story of the largest point-shaving scandal in history and the consequences that served thereafter. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Joseph Gagliano. Joseph, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
No problem, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
You know, I really enjoyed reading this book, and I think even as intriguing as the point-shaving situation was, it became even more intriguing in your business dealings, and it seemed to me like, you know, did this guy just kind of fall into good luck and hard luck all at the same time? I mean, did you come to any conclusions as you look back on all this?
Boy, I came to a lot of conclusions. Writing the book was a painful experience for me personally, and you know, I'm glad you read it. I'm thankful you read it, and so obviously you know where I wrote it and the events as to why I wrote it. But yeah, it was certainly eye-opening for me to go back and kind of isolate each point in my life where I made a decision, and I made a decision, suffered the consequences for it, but as to, you know, looking back and reflecting as to why I made that decision was certainly an eye-opening experience.
Now, I know that, you know, as you get toward the end of your story, one of the more interesting insights was that of your son, looking back on this and thinking to himself that he was still proud to have you as a father because you were willing to go to the lengths you were to provide a really good life for your family. And certainly that puts you in that gray area, you know, where you're looking, well, I'm not really harming anybody, so to speak, you know, and that sort of thing. And it's interesting how we'll rationalize behavior when we inherently know maybe it's not the right course of action.
No, you're right. You're right. And like I said, I said before, it's you know, I looked back and I was able to retrack all the choices that I pinpointed throughout that journey, that crazy journey, and you know, really put myself in check as to why that choice was made. Was it instant gratification? Was it because I truly felt it was the right decision at that point? And 9 times out of 10, when I look back and the choices had ugly consequences for it, it was because it was for instant gratification. And a lot of it, Daniel, was quite frankly, was to try to perform for an audience of many. I found myself after the ASU scandal and after I got branded a felon, and I was completely embarrassed by it in many, many ways, and being labeled a felon and having that perceived stereotype on me, and I found myself performing or trying to perform for an audience of many and to prove to other people that I was not this god-awful person that people thought I was that orchestrated this crazy event. So, you know, a lot of it was isolating the choices I made, the reason why I made those choices, and realizing that the first time that I compromised my integrity, that it was, you know, each time I did so, I got further and further off of center until, you know, 5, 10, 15 years later down the road, it was next to impossible to get back to center again.
Now, let's talk about the actual scandal itself, because there were people that were in there on the take, including the guard, or actually it was a couple of guards that were on the Arizona State University basketball team. How did all this start? How did it get introduced to you?
Well, I was trading bond futures at the Chicago Board of Trade. I was on the trading floor for about 9 years, and I was making a lot of money at a young age, you know, and blessed and cursed is how I always refer to it. As blessed because I was making a few bucks, but cursed because I didn't really appreciate how I got it. It was just so easy to get. And a lot of it, you know, why I titled the book No Gray Areas, excuse me, is because of the environment that I was in. We're all products of our environment, and the environment that I was in really embraced the gray areas. When you look at the word successful, honest, ethical trader, in my mind, Daniel, it's an oxymoron.
And anybody who knows anything about Enron or WorldCom understands the same thing.
Yeah, it's the Gordon Gekko approach that greed is good. And when I was on that trading floor and 21, 22, 23 years old, the guys that I looked up to, the guys that I emulated, that I wanted to be for quote-unquote success, were all living in the gray area. So that was my environment, so to speak. So when, at that point, I had my brother going to school at Arizona State University, and I would fly out to Tempe to visit him and his friends quite often, and I had a few bucks in my pocket, so everyone was treated well on the college campus. And when the opportunity presented itself, my brother lived next door to a bookmaker on campus, and this bookmaker had a client, college clientele, and one of his clients was Stephen Headache Smith. And Stephen Headache Smith got into the bookmaker for about $25,000 or $30,000 and had no way to pay it. So because I was in the gray area, because my moral compass was certainly not absolute, I concocted a plan to have him fix and control the outcome of what I only thought would be 2 games. But greed kills, and 2 turns into 3, and 3 turns into 4, and before you know it, too many people are involved, and too many people have knowledge of it, and everything kind of fell apart.
Now, when you think about it, too, I remember watching there was a documentary called, I think it was The Queen of Versailles, and it's a story about the gentleman who had built this single largest personally owned resorts, and he just about went bankrupt. And it was interesting what one of the kids were saying is, here you have this ability to have pretty much anything that you want to, and pretty soon you find that you want more and more and more of it. And people, taking a look at your story, for instance, or, people that work in these gray areas making all this money can tend to take a sort of a righteous point saying, well, they're just greedy. But the fact is, that can be kind of inherent in all of us once you have a taste of something like that.
I think you're spot on with that. And not to quote, I think it was Jay-Z at all, but, the quote is more money, more problems. I always thought, and people always think, gosh, if I just had this amount of money in a bank, or gosh, if I was just debt-free, or gosh, if I just drove this type of car. It's challenging that when you get to that point that you're going to be comfortable and content and secure, because you're always going to want more. Now, I think a lot of it was the environment that I was in at the Board of Trade, and that whole competitive nature that's behind it, where greed and excess are embraced. But a lot of it, post Arizona State, was really just to shed a label. But boy, I can completely agree with what you're saying, is that once most people get to a certain point that they've always dreamt was the holy grail in life, that's 9 times out of 10, that's not the place they want to be, that they want more, because it's more money, more problems. There's a bigger house you wanted. There's a different type of car you wanted. There's another vacation you want to take. So there's always going to be that desire for more. In most people, very few people are actually built and wired to a degree that they can be truly content. It's a challenge.
That's certainly true. And, at the time when you were convicted and you were sent to prison, there was kind of an area I didn't want to keep punching the label of being a convicted felon, but that was one of the outcomes. Because what to me was interesting about that is the fact that you go and you pay your debt to society, but you're tacked with a label that really has consequences for the rest of a person's life, no matter how much they try to change. And you really worked at changing and being above board and being honest, especially when it came to your business dealings, but then you found the characters, it's sort of like that weird karma that comes back and says, no, I don't think you get it yet. We're still going to teach you until you finally do. Tell us about that.
Well, I'll tell you what, and Daniel, I'm very, very cautious not to come across as a victim to any of your listeners or
right.
I don't want to become a victim or portray myself as a victim. I own what I did. I own it every day. I wrote about it. I speak about it candidly. Hey, I'm probably the dumbest smart guy you'll ever talk to. So it's I own what I did, and I own the choices that I did, but people really don't understand. The people that have not gone through a legal process or, God forbid, a criminal process, and they get labeled, and they get a felony label on them, those people are very fortunate. They don't understand the ramifications that comes along with being a felon or having any type of criminal record. You are literally just really handcuffed and persecuted the rest of your days. There's very limited opportunity for employment for larger companies that, that they could say that they don't discriminate, but they will. They won't hire you. There's very few opportunities for bank loans. There's very few opportunities to do a lot of things that most people somewhat take for granted. So to get labeled a felon, it is, you have to kind of reinvent yourself, especially in the information age, Daniel. Information is so plentiful, and that was the big reason why I decided to write the book. When I came home from prison, I Googled my name, and there's a magazine called The Mob Report, if you can
Wow.
actually believe that there's a magazine that has success called The Mob Report. And they did an article in there for the 20th anniversary of the ASU scandal, and they ran an article about me, saying that I was involved in organized crime, prostitution, loan sharking.
Oh, no.
And I'm looking at this nonsense, and I'm shaking my head saying, how the heck can somebody write this stuff? Now, granted, my last name ends in a vowel. Granted, there's probably some lineage in my family with organized crime, but that is not me at all. My father was a police officer in Chicago. We were a family of faith, a family with values. We were nowhere near that side of the law. And to have that publicly written and out there in the information age that anyone can look at is horrifying. I'll give you an example of that. My oldest daughter's 21. She's dating, or was dating, I should say, a real nice kid out of Southern California, a very, very good family. And the parents wanted to get to know me a little bit. They Google that, they see that. Now, they think I am the devil in disguise. They don't know anything about me. They've never met me. They've never met my person. They don't know my character. They don't know what I'm about. But yet, perception is reality. So I kind of take you down that path to tell you that, Pete, to answer your question directly, is that people don't understand the ramifications of being a felon and what that carries, not only for employment and banking and everything else that I covered, but also because of the information age. Anyone can learn anything about anyone at any given time.
And you're pointing at an age that we're in now. Like you said, it's the information age. Information is accessible regardless if it's true. And if people take a look back, not that I'm taking sides, but certainly it was blatantly there in everybody's face, was during our last election cycle. You could see how it seemed the media was not necessarily saying they were on Hillary's side, but they certainly weren't for Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. And I thought to myself, this is the same industry that I work in that's supposed to be about having enough integrity to have good information, right information, before you open up your mouth or you put your pen to paper and you put it out there. But we're at a point we don't even care about that anymore.
Yeah, there's, I think for the most part, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners, and maybe you will too, will take objection to this, integrity for the most part is out the window. It is a very self-serving society. My father and my parents always used to tell me, Joey, at the end of the day, if you can count your true friends that are truly going to be happy for you on one hand, you're a blessed man. And, looking back, here I am 48 years old, and they were spot on right. Because you're going to find very few people that truly are going to be champions for you and truly going to be excited for your success, that are going to be there for your downturns and just be happy for you in every way, shape, or form. The the bulk of society are they're just self-serving people. Whether it is in politics, and we saw it with the election and with Trump and Clinton, there were self-serving agendas on both sides as to what was said and how it was said. And it's the same thing in our society in every facet we look at. It's a very self-serving world.
And it really hasn't changed a whole lot over the last 100 years or so, and I'll give you an example. About a year ago, I had a wonderful guest on the program by the name of Bill Friedman, and he was the one who had authored the book 30 Illegal Years to the Strip. And this was a story about the gangsters that all came together, and they actually built Las Vegas. Now, this guy here was steeped into 50 years that he did the research on this book. He's also a gentleman that's been the only one by Las Vegas who has ever been commissioned or granted 2 gaming licenses, so he was able to run 2 hotels. And this was someone who was also known to, let's say, commiserate with the underworld. But he had just as much integrity in the underworld as he did with the legal world. And I'll tell you, when you're reading his book, especially about the kind of nonsense that Dewey was getting away with back in the day, especially when it came to shackling Lucky Luciano, who was a guy who actually should be revered as an American hero for helping win the war, but you realize law doesn't work that way, and you certainly had that experience on your second go-around. And we're talking about this was a time you were building businesses, car washes. You were doing very, very well, but then you had some real shady dealings with some people there, and there was no evidence against you saying that you had done anything wrong, but the law just didn't care because what they seen was that nice, as you said, they seen a chance to put a second star on somebody's back, so to speak.
Yeah, and gosh, I really appreciate the way you said that, Daniel, and once again, very careful not to come across as a victim, but you are just spot on. No matter how much lipstick I put on this pig, I can't get away from the fact of what you just said is the spot-on truth. Because I am not really sure, and I'm semi-intelligent, I am not really even sure what I did to get indicted the second time around. Okay? If it wasn't for the collapse of the economy, none of us have ever seen had happened in 2008, 2009, 2010, the catastrophic collapse of the economy. I never defaulted on a loan before prior to that event. I built this building. It was $5.2 million. I put a $3.6 million loan into it. I put north of $1.5 million into the deal in cash. I did an SBA loan because that was the only credit market that was remotely even lending in 2008 after I got done with construction on this project. And I'm the trustee and have blanket power of attorney on my parents' estate. And we did a loan deal, and I didn't have the proper power of attorney at the title company, but the title company knew what was going on, the banks knew what was going on, everyone knew what was going on. And when the loan went bad 3 years later, not due to the business, not due to anything that I could have controlled, it was solely just the economy, they came after me for conspiracy to commit bank fraud.
Oh boy.
There was no intent to deceive. There was no intent to defraud. We certainly never made any money on the deal. We lost $1.5 million. It was a painful experience. But I look at that, Daniel, and I say, still to this day, after I've served my time and after I wrote the book and after I'm trying to do good things in my life yet again, I'm still not even sure what the heck I did. And I'm convinced, and I will go toe-to-toe with any U.S. attorney, I'll go toe-to-toe with any U.S. judge or any federal judge, I'm convinced, they won't admit it, but I'll go toe-to-toe with them, saying that if it wasn't for the ASU choice that I made in 93, 94, granted it was a high-profile case, granted my name in the FBI office was pretty well known, if it wasn't for that case 20 years earlier, I would have never been looked at in 2009 and 10 on this deal. I was what I called in the book low-hanging fruit. They knew if they indicted me, they knew I would have to plead. Because let's look at it, and people don't understand this, and I'm going to break this down for you, and let's say you and your listeners, to get this. if someone has a felony, a prior in their background, like I did for the ASU case, and me or someone else gets indicted. Now, I got indicted on 7 counts of bank fraud or conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The word conspiracy is an amazing word that the government uses. I
got like the word interesting. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that's right. It's you and I are conspiring right now. That's how the term is used with the government. But I have 7 counts of conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Daniel, I tell you, on my 4 children, which are the holiest things in my world, I beat 6 of those 7 counts 8 days a week. Because they were just them throwing nonsense at a wall to see if something would stick to make it look more grandiose on an indictment. I beat 6 of those 7 counts 8 days a week. The 1 count for signing those documents improperly without the power of attorney, we could argue the heck out of it. We could put a really good spin on the story. There's a lot of factual information. I had a boatload of emails. I had some witnesses. But if I took them to trial and did not accept accountability for my quote-unquote crime, I took them to trial and I lost on 1 count, because what you're going to do is you're going to put me in front of a jury of 12. And they're going to see all this stuff. The jury of 12 is going to be the worker bees of America, right? And they're going to see my tax returns. They're going to see the homes I lived in. They're going to know that my last name ends in a vowel, and the U.S. attorney is going to kind of insinuate that there's organized crime, and they're going to know about the ASU case, and they're going to know all these things that happened 14, 15, 16 years earlier. And so you're going to put me in front of a jury, and all this stuff's going to come out, and this jury of 12 people is going to say, well, he may not have done all those things, but he had to do something to get there. He had to do something. Why would the government bring this type of case? He had to do something. And if I would have been found guilty on 1 count, mandatory minimum 10 years.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mandatory. So that's what people don't understand, is that the government has so much flippant power in these criminal cases that they force you into a corner. You have to plead. So what I did is I had to plead for something that I'm still, to this day, not even sure what the heck I did. And I had to sit down with all 4 of my kids, say, hey, guys, Daddy's going away to prison. I'm not exactly sure what I did, but I have to go away. And I'm sorry. I love you. I'm going to miss your proms. I'm going to miss your graduations. I'm going to miss you going off to college. I'm going to miss your baseball games. All these things. And that's what people don't understand if they're ever, God forbid, inside that situation.
Now, you finally did get to a point. I think all of us may at one time or another get close to it, but you got to a point you were at the end of your rope and you just didn't see any other way out. But then that's when things really began to change for you at the same time. So as bad as everything was, that was the turning point for you. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm a man of strong faith, Daniel, and things are not always on our time, but they're always on time. And, it's I believe God closes the door and opens up a window, and I could throw a lot more metaphors at you if you want.
There's a reason the windshield's bigger than the rearview mirror was the other one.
Boy, you read that one too. That's
yeah.
Right. And so I was really in a dark place. I got indicted that second time, and I pled guilty. And like I said earlier, not knowing what the heck I did, knowing that I was going to go away to prison, and I'm saying, what the heck am I causing all this pain for my family? Why is this going on? Maybe they'd be better. And I was in a bad place of mind, and I just said maybe they'd be better off if I wasn't even here. So, wrongly, I charted a path to end myself, but to commit suicide and call it a day. And I just thought that my family would be better off, and people that I loved would be better off, because, hey, obviously this stuff's not really working that I'm doing. And, walked into a church one day over here locally in Scottsdale and ran into a guy in the lobby that I hadn't seen in 15 years, and he kind of knew I was in a bad place. And I walked into that church just for the sole purpose, as wrongly as this is going to sound, to ask God to forgive me for what I was about to do. That was probably 2-3 hours away from executing my plan. And it was really, really a freaky, for lack of a better word, when I look back at that now, as to seeing somebody that I hadn't seen in 15 years and nobody else in the lobby because I walked in late, and him just walking up to me and just would not leave my side. And, you know, him and another guy by the name of Andre Wadsworth just really stuck with me for the next 2-3 months. I couldn't even shed those guys if I tried. And, you know, they pulled me through it, and I got through the sentencing and went away, did my time, and put things in place. And they were a rock here with my wife and my kids along the way as I was away, and we just managed to get through it all.
You know, and what makes this story compelling for the listeners out there is they think, well, you know, how does something like this concern me? And maybe it doesn't. But the fact is, we all can get to that point where it's dark. We feel that we're at the end of our rope, and we feel that the best way to relieve the pain is to make that choice to just end it all. And I remember there was a friend of mine years ago who found herself in a position like that. And I said, well, you know, here's the reason you need to hopefully work through this. Keep just taking one step at a time, breathe in and out, just see what the next moment brings you. The reason being is because you will see you become stronger as you find your way through this. And it's important because if you decided to, let's say, end it all, then you remove the opportunity someone else may have to be influenced by the behavior that you were strong enough in to realize, you know, things look pretty bad now, but if I just keep taking that one step at a time, they can turn. That is my desire, and that is very, very possible. And I think that's why this is an important story, because, you know, a lot of times people will do things, you know, that are so irrational in light of their circumstances that may not be as extreme as the situations you found yourself in. But you took accountability for your actions. You took complete responsibility, and I'm always of the belief, as soon as you take 100% responsibility for everything that happens in your life, life really does get a lot easier. That was certainly a conclusion you came to.
Well, it was a painful conclusion, that's for sure.
Right.
But you're 100% right, Daniel. And not that I shrugged off the acceptability or the responsibility earlier in life. It's just maybe I was looking for shortcuts. Maybe I was looking for an easier way to shed that felony label. Maybe you know, maybe I was cutting corners that should not have been cut. So yeah, that was a big part. It's, you know, what they say, denial is more than a river in Egypt, right?
Right.
So it's you know, it was a painful process to get through that, and you know, I'm firmly convinced that everything happens for a reason, and the dark days that happened have made me stronger, my wife and I stronger, and the relationship with my kids a lot stronger too.
Absolutely, and I think it takes a lot of courage for somebody to be able to put this out there the way that you have, and it's certainly more than just wearing your heart on the sleeve, but it's some excellent insights about, for instance, conducting good business. Make sure you get your I's crossed and your T's dotted, whatever the case may be, because there are some shadier people out there than yourself, even when you're trying to get up on the straight and narrow. Joseph, is there a website people can find out about the book and how they can go about getting it, things like that?
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff online. There's a website directly called No Gray Areas, and Gray is spelled, Daniel, Grey. So if you go to nograyareas.com, there's a bunch of videos up there. We're doing a movie right now. We're doing a documentary that's really geared towards incoming freshmen to be used for college curriculum. The movie should be done in the next 18 to 24 months. So you'll see some bunch of videos on there, a bunch of social media clips, a bunch of press releases, and I think there's 2 or 3 movie trailers on there too. So nograyareas.com, you can see everything in No Gray Areas on Facebook, No Gray Areas Instagram, No Gray Areas on Twitter. We made it really easy. Everything's No Gray Areas. So,
we just made sure there was no gray areas.
Yeah, that's it. And you know, I think those words kind of encompass just about everything in people's lives and people's choices, especially with the information age the way it is, and what we talked about earlier about choices and consequences to choices, and compromising integrity and putting yourself in check for the choices that you're making. And I painfully put this book out there, and if people will say he's a convicted felon, he's trying to make a few bucks, and those people are ignorant, Daniel, and I'm telling you.
Well, they would have to be, because you don't make a whole bunch of money selling books this day.
I can tell you, it's not only have we not made money, we've probably lost tens of thousands on this thing so far, but there's certainly, and I can say this from the depths of my heart, there's certainly no agenda to profit from the pain. My goal in putting this out there, and as you said, candidly put this out there, I mean, I don't sugarcoat anything inside this thing. It's the facts, it's the ugly facts, and it's out there, and it's been very well reviewed, and the takeaways that a lot of people have has been very, very encouraging for me personally, but it's out there in a way where if I can help somebody, a couple people or a few people down this road be cognizant of their choices when they're making their choices and understand that there's a consequence to the choice. That's really what the mission is. That's really what the mission is. I was talking to the producers that are doing the movie, and they said to me a couple of weeks ago, they said, Joe, at the end of the day, if we can get some guy that's working for a company and filling out an expense report on a weekly or monthly basis to be aware of what he's writing on that expense report, then we've done our duty. Because a lot of people, take something as simple as just fudging an expense report because they think they can, and not realizing that there's going to be a consequence for it. It may feel good for the time being when that money gets replenished inside your account, but there's going to be a consequence.
Well, not only that, but somebody who pulls that, and I've known people, for instance, in the bartending industry that would do that. And I'm like, how do you live with yourself? Don't you ever think that when you go home that somebody somehow, some way is going to find out what you've done? I mean, it's going to come. You're going to get sloppy after a while, and it's going to get you. And then you're going to try to turn yourself into a victim, and it's like, this is not the way it works, No. Play the game to your best level and see what the rewards are. That's what you should be satisfied with, and when people can experience that, they won't need to go about doing that fudging of the numbers or things like that, but, certainly the temptation always seems to be there anyway.
No, you're 100% spot on. I'll give you a real quick little story. We were at dinner the other night at a Mexican restaurant with my wife and my kids, and my 16-year-old daughter knew the waitress over there because I guess they go to school together. And we got done eating, and this waitress brings over ice cream for the entire table, ice cream sundaes. And she says to my daughter, she goes, "Here, this is on me." And I turned to my daughter, and I said, "How do you feel about that?" She goes, "Oh, that's great. She's giving us free ice cream." I said, "No, she doesn't own this restaurant. She's an employee here. Who is she to give away product?" Right. And it's, they looked at me like I was, "Dad, are you crazy? We're getting free ice cream." But it's little things like that. And I think 10 years ago, Daniel, I would have never thought like that. But it's, it's through maturation, through maturity process, and through life journeys that hopefully we can impart some wisdom on other people, and that's really what the message in the book is. Well, there's certainly no doubt about that, and I know for the listeners out there, it's also just a really enjoyable read. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff in there, and I encourage people to do pick that up so they can maybe not march in those gray areas and do things the way they should be so they don't have to worry about looking over their shoulder wondering, what is that long arm of the law going to catch up to me, or whatever it may be. So, Joseph, thank you so much for being on the program today, and for our listeners, go ahead and give out that website again. I will, Daniel. NoGrayAreas.com, and gray is spelled Grey. Very good. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. All right, buddy. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. You bet it. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You can also discover more. Visit us at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. Sign up for our weekly e-newsletter and stay updated on what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as upcoming programs. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.